All right, welcome to the podcast. This is A1 Nick. We have a second COVID-19 podcast with attorney Myles Breiner. How's it going, Mr. Breiner?
Going great, under the circumstances. Working out of my house today.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, we got to do what we got to do in these the new normal, right?
And it's very difficult. Clients still need assistance. We can't get access to the court because of the COVID-19 problem. Yet we still have to, we're an essential service. That's what we've been designated by the state, and we're still trying to provide that service. So right now our focus is on trying to help inmates get out of custody so they can avoid further exposure to the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, so what specifically, what actions have you had to take on behalf of your clients to get them out of custody?
Well, I think I sent you a text yesterday. What's really going on is the Public Defender's Office has taken the lead statewide, and they're working with the Prosecutor's Office in each of the counties to try to assist in getting release for various public defender clients. It looks like it's having a positive effect. I've been in touch with the prosecutors over in Maui and in Kauai and on the Big Island, and they're working with private counsel as well as with Public Defender's Office. Generally speaking, they're working on stipulations for early release. For those inmates that the prosecutor's office are declining to stipulate, the attorneys are filing petitions to have an immediate hearing before the admin judge for whichever court they're in, whether it's the Big Island, Hawaii, Maui, or Wahoo. So that's what we've been working on for the last couple of days, since about starting on Monday, and it's been increasing every day, the number of requests from clients to get their family members out of custody and so they can shelter in home.
Yeah, so is that like an expansion and use of the Wahoo Intake Service Center, maybe putting people on supervised release, or is this like more own recognizance style releases?
Right now it's on their own recognizance, but they'd have to report, I guess we're trying to work out the details, report via telephone to Intake Service Center to make sure they're in compliance. The main problem is that everyone knows that we have reached the peak of the COVID-19 outbreak. We're still ascending. You can see the news every day, the number of people that are getting exposed and the number of people that are dying. So they know that one of the critical vectors where inmates are located, since they're living in such close proximity, it's a guarantee they're going to be exposed, and the facilities don't have the ability to take care of hundreds and hundreds of inmates that are going to become sick.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to think about the close quarters of all those inmates, especially with the overcrowding issue. There's sometimes 2 or 3, or worst case scenario, I've even heard of 4 people in the exact same cell. If one of them has it, automatically it's going to spread like wildfire.
Well, it's impossible to avoid it. The cells, OCCC was designed, I think, originally to have 500 to 600 inmates. They're exploding at the seams. There are something on the order of 1,200 inmates at OCCC. So you're looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 people. Generally, it's 3 to 4 people per cell. So you would have 2 bunks that are chained to the wall. You have someone on top bunk, lower bunk, and then you have a third person who sleeps underneath the bottom bunk, and then a fourth person who sleeps in the common area. All this in a new space that's roughly 7 feet by 4 feet.
It's so inhumane.
It's unmanageable for this one person. Imagine 3 to 4 people in those conditions. And because of the COVID-19 problem, the inmates are not being released from their cells. So essentially, you're creating a breeding ground for a number of people that are exponentially going to be exposed to the larger community. So time is of the essence to get these people released and put into at least the home confinement, so they're sheltering either with their families or in their own homes.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to get those people out, because it really is quite inhumane what we do to other people when we have them in custody, whether their bail is set at such a high amount they didn't take into effect, like the financial standings of the defendant, or if they've been quote unquote overcharged, which is a general practice, as you've noted on our past podcasts. It's like a general operating, the MO sometimes of the prosecutor's office is to overcharge people, right? There's just so many factors that could keep people in versus getting them out.
Well, it was particularly troubling, and I know that you were aware of this. Your father testified at one of the many hearings that we had. About 2 years ago, I was participating along with about 50 other participants, representatives from the police departments from all the neighbor islands, representatives from the Attorney General's office, representatives from all the prosecuting offices throughout the state, participating in a forum to address inequities in the bail system. The recommendations were put together. Judge Shirley Kawamura and former Judge Ram Trader headed up the task force, and we made significant recommendations to the legislature, and we were hoping that they would be adopted, if not in full, at least in substance. The problem is that we're still getting significant resistance on the prosecution side. There seems to be a general rejection by law enforcement to amend and modify the pretrial confinement conditions for inmates. It's astounding. Even as of today, as of yesterday, when I contacted the prosecutor's office in Honolulu, they're taking a position. They're adamant. They will not agree to any stipulation of release of any inmates. They're going to compel everyone to file petitions to contest it.
Wow.
So we're getting a different response from Maui. I have at least one person in Maui that by stipulation is getting released. The other inmates, the inmates the clients that I have that are inmates at OCCC here on Oahu, we're filing petitions. But it's just going to be protracted because we can't get into court, although this is considered an essential issue, a critical issue. They will schedule it. It's still going to be problematic if we're going to get into court in the next 5 to 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to even have these petitions addressed. And in that time period, people become quite sick. I personally have a number of clients that are in their late 60s, 60s into their 70s. These individuals are particularly vulnerable. They're going to be exposed, given the confinement in terms of conditions of their incarceration, most likely are going to come down with the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a side note, but then I'm going to circle right back to COVID-19. And this report, which you participated in the task force, the HCR Task Force, you guys had so much good information in there. It got published, and then I remember going to the legislature as like, I swear, I don't think any of the legislators even bothered reading it in its entirety, or they skimmed through it. They had Judge Trader and Judge Kawamura like testifying, and I was convinced that they didn't even really read the report. A lot of times you could kind of tell by the questions that they're asking, they either didn't understand it or they didn't bother reading it. I
went to several of those hearings, and I remember seeing you there. I was in the back of the room. What was surprising is I don't think that most of the people that were in the decision-making position even looked at the table of contents. They simply had it in their hand, and the fact that it was 2 inches thick, double-sided, double-spaced, with double-sided pages, I think that was a frightening experience for them, that they were expected to actually have some knowledge of what they were going to decide and what they're going to vote on. Fortunately, Judge Trader and Judge Kawamura were very articulate. They were great advocates for making these changes. And it's not like we're opening up the floodgates. I mean, the most dangerous individuals, the ones who are violent offenders, we're not going to get released. It's the other people, and the vast majority of people are not violent offenders. The vast majority are drug-related, and everyone, whether you're a prosecutor, assistant U.S. attorney, a deputy prosecutor, or a public defender, or private counsel, everyone's aware that the vast majority of people that are incarcerated are there for crimes that are related to their drug addiction or their substance abuse issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lack of nuance when it comes to the people who advocate on behalf of those people versus the people like me and you who day-to-day work with the people, there's like a disconnect. There's what I guess people read in headlines and maybe they read in academic papers and stuff, but then there's the people who actually work day to day with this population, like you, like me, the judges that see these people every single day at arraignment and plea, the families who we all talk to on the phone because they're trying to retain private counsel or they're trying to retain a bail agent to go ahead and get people out. Like, we see the actual cases. It's not just anecdotal stuff that we bring up. It's like real world experience. And that's far different than the stuff that you just read on, you know what I mean, like on these subjects, like the headlines that people don't bother looking into the information. There's a huge amount of nuance when it comes to violent versus nonviolent, probation offender versus pretrial. There's so many different angles, but I guess it's too much of a story for people to understand.
I love the service, that you're doing these podcasts for A1 bail bond and getting these issues out in the public domain. I would urge you to contact the various people that are running for prosecutor in the First Circuit. We'd like to hear their position in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, how they feel about releasing people on their own recognizance, especially the nonviolent offenders.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anyone say anything other than elect me.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I got Judge Alm coming up. We were supposed to have the podcast yesterday, but we had to obey social distancing, which is a very responsible part that he brought up to me a few days before. And then that's what started this format of podcasting where, I'm talking to you on a cell phone, right? You know what I mean? So we're trying to do our part, right?
I'm balancing my time, my office, my home, to running downtown, and teleconferencing or video conferencing with my staff. We set up a system about 4 or 5 days ago, Zoom.com, so we're able to communicate with each other. It's very effective. I don't know how long it's going to last. It still has the right to confrontation, which is fundamental. So I don't think we're going to be able to conduct proper cross-examination via video. So hence, I think we're going to be looking at the entire court system being backed up well into the end of the year with jury trials that are going to be postponed. But there's certain other things that can be done via video teleconferencing.
Yeah, no, totally. And I hope this opens up that conversation. And you know what? They allow on the misdemeanor level, as I know and I've learned from you guys, a lot of times you could waive the presence of your client. For a lot of different hearings when it comes to the felony stuff, that could just as easily be waived too. Or you guys could just go ahead and do it via teleconference, right? Or video conference. I think Zoom needs to be embraced.
I agree, absolutely, and I think more and more people. I've been promoting it. I've been sending out messages to the HATFL members, from president of HATFL, Hawaii Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. I think pretty much everyone realizes we're going to have to use some type of video conferencing. Certainly, for misdemeanor cases, yes, you can waive their presence, and frankly, for most felony cases, if it's a non-evidentiary hearing, you can waive their presence.
Yeah. Not for every hearing. I'm not suggesting that, but there are certain ones that they're just procedural. That's the whole point. It's not like you're on trial via teleconference. It's just a procedural, like, hey, I had to be here to accept a status conference? What do you have to be there for a status conference?
Exactly.
Right?
And normally we wait in line in the chambers or in the waiting area to go into the chambers with the court. So this way we avoid that, and probably it's more effective this way.
Yeah, people got to go to work.
I've been doing that for years with my cases on the neighbor islands. Most of the judges, if we request in advance via email or phone call to appear by telephone, they don't have a problem with it. It's a more effective way of dealing with their caseload.
Yeah, and plus, your time is valuable. I feel as though there's been like an underemphasis on like the top guys like you. It's so incredibly hard you guys can't be at two places at one time. Like, you could get more done and you could do more good if they allowed you to like be more efficient with your time, if they're just more considerate of your time, if the court could just, adopt some of these exact changes that they're doing by necessity now, and then hopefully do it in the normal course after this as well.
Well, I don't mind waiting for half hour, 45 minutes, even an hour, queuing up for a telephone conference with a judge on a neighbor island versus standing in line at the airport, going through security, flying over, renting a car. It's just not an effective use of everyone's time. Most importantly, it's not an effective use of the court's time. We get a lot more done by teleconferencing.
Yeah, totally. And you never know, there might be, other benefits that, the courts see too. Like what if they can get through more cases, they could get their calendars cleared out because a lot of like the procedural stuff could get done in a morning versus having to schedule and reschedule and reschedule. It's crazy. When I go to court and I see the prosecutor's office tell like their schedule, and then I see the defense say their schedule, and I have a trial that week, can we schedule for that? And then I'm going to be out of the office, says the prosecutor, that week. And then you guys go through this song and dance of trying to find a time that you guys can both meet. It's just ridiculous.
Well, you look at the number of cases that are at least in the First Circuit, because we have the largest population concentrations on Oahu, so we have the largest number of cases in the court system. So the judges, we have roughly, approximately 20 judges that are hearing trials, and they can only hear so many at any given time, since you have generally a jury trial is what you want in most cases, and those trials are a whole other matter. But it's impossible to handle this in the way that given the pressure on the system and the number of people that are getting arrested and prosecuted. So one way of resolving this is start with the people that are in custody. It reduces the pressure on the courts to hear their cases because they're in custody. Certainly want to take people who are waiting and stacked up in jail cells at OCCC or MCCC or HCCC. Unfortunately, the pushback we're getting is coming mostly from the prosecutors. They're refusing to do anything other than the same old story, which is keep the person in custody. As longer they're in custody, the more likely is they're going to get a plea. Unfortunately, we can't do that given the circumstances with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, I'll bring up that very same point. I got a few more candidates to go for the podcast series, and as soon as I reschedule with Judge and I want to get public defender Jackie Esser on the podcast as well to get her side and her the innovations that she wants to go ahead and start. I'm very fired up to put it to them and get some answers on that.
I'm happy to see we have a wide range of people that are running for prosecutor. I am getting frustrated with the backlog in the courts. It's tempting to throw my name into the fray, but no, I'll let these folks decide who's going to be prosecutor.
Well, you were a former prosecutor. If you want to step back in, you know what I mean. It's there, right? So
it's there. Frankly, we need a serious reexamination of how the prosecutor's offices are working, especially in light of what's occurring. We need to focus on, as I said, the violent offenders, and we have to have diversionary programs. We are wasting precious funds that we don't have. The state cannot afford, especially in light of what's going on. The economy is going to tank. We have a biggest industry economy. The vast majority of people are not working. And this is going to drag on, not for a couple of weeks. This is not the fantasy world of Donald Trump. We haven't peaked yet, and we know that we're looking at probably going well into the summer, maybe even the fall, before this thing starts to flatten out. We'll be fortunate if come Christmas, they have a control on the spread of the virus, and the hospitals still have to address the issue of enough ventilators, enough staffing. Hopefully the staff don't become ill. These are all critical issues that, and we can do something about it by reducing the number of people who are possibly going to get exposed, which is coming from what place? Mostly the prisons. Where people are concentrated and can't space themselves out, can't quarantine themselves.
Yeah, and we've gotten lucky when it comes to these like pandemics. I remember swine flu, bird flu, H1N1, Zika, Ebola. Like for whatever reason, we haven't had it hit America and like really just ravage and go across. Like what's happening in New York. We haven't had a New York disaster.
I'd like to see an investigation by a special prosecutor into the various legislators, both on the House side and the Senate side, that got wind of this and started dumping their stocks before they declared a pandemic. A lot of
Yeah.
you are buddies of the president.
Yeah, and it gets super political. It's not about just helping your fellow man, but yeah, that there definitely needs to be change, and I'm hoping that this brings light on everything because I mean, there's not just the pretrial population, which of course we need to advocate for as well. There's the people who might be serving, you know, those like probation sentences, those short sentences, those holds. They might be just waiting to get like that hearing where they reschedule. They modify the conditions of their release and then they just release them after anyway. That could be sped up. So there's a whole segment of people at OCCC that aren't even pretrial but are like probation violators that, shoot, nothing wrong with having a little jubilee. Maybe they don't need to wait 3 weeks for their hearing, right?
And we still haven't addressed the issue of the people that are on furlough who have to complete furlough to be eligible for parole. So we have hundreds of people that come up, you know, monthly that are eligible for furlough consideration as a predicate, as a basis for then going in fully parole. All that's come to a screeching halt. No one's able to go out and assess into the homes of the people that where someone would be paroled to. Employers can't employ anyone, so you can't furlough someone to seek a job. That's the whole nature of furlough, is transition someone who's been in custody for a year or more, 2 years or more, so they can readjust and get into the community by finding a job. Well, no jobs available because everything's shut down. So people are sitting, for example, in Module 20 at OCCC, waiting to go out and find a job. Well, they're mostly waiting to get sick. I'm fortunately, attorneys are still able to get into OCCC. I went in and saw a number of inmates over the last week. And they're all very frightened that they're going to get sick and then not be able to be on furlough, and then have their parole delayed. So again, we created this perfect storm through a series of bad decision making, and they saw this coming. As you said, we had the H1N1 virus, SARS, we had Ebola. I mean, this was predicted. There was a book that came out back in 2003 in the wake of the plague about the Black Plague that occurred in 1347 to 1350, and roughly half the population of Europe was wiped out. And back in 2003, when that book came out, there was congressional subcommittees that were meeting in Washington, D.C., discussing possible pandemics. And recommendations were made, we're talking 17 years ago, that they still have not implemented. And we're still listening to, you know, the remarks of our vice president as well as the president, who are opining about medicine that presently has no efficacy, yet they're foisting this false narrative on the public. It's not a healthy thing, and it's making things much worse.
Yeah, and maybe this will give like advocates for people in custody like a new angle because disclosure, I'm a bail bondsman. I've been pinned as the problem. Cash bail, we're the root of all evil. We're the reason why people are in custody, overcrowding. It all falls on us in cash. But we all know that there's more issues than just the cash. You know what I mean? And if we could use the threat of a pandemic to advocate for people to have better holding conditions, less likely to be held in those conditions, more possibilities to have like remotely have them, you know, sheltered somewhere so that they could go ahead and obey the orders during a pandemic, that could become more normalized. Now you got like several different tools to go ahead and help prison overcrowding. You could have the cash bail, which I guess if you have the money, that's the best way. You could have the bail agent, which is the way to just pay a percentage and get a cosigner. You could have supervised release, which is, you know, conditions, you got your curfew, you got to go check in, and maybe they could have modifications within that where maybe you could qualify more easily for own recognizance, or they have more relaxed requirements. Like you don't have to show up somewhere. Maybe you could just, you know, call in and check in that way, or check in via phone app. There could be like a whole palette of different ways to get people out. I've always like been against taking one or two things out of the mix when it's all hands on deck. When it comes to dealing with a pandemic, an emergency, bail reform, it's all hands on deck.
Why not authorize, for example, bail bond companies that can afford it to have electronic monitors?
Yeah.
To give those to their clients, you know, and then put the onus on the bail bond company working in conjunction with Intake Service Center to monitor their clients pending trials and whatnot. So I mean, the alternatives are there. It's just the lack of creativity, and people are afraid to make a decision. It's that one person. You have release 100 people and 99 do great. One person, falls down and commits the crime, and then they shut the whole entire thing down. That's not a rational approach to the problem.
Yeah, and it's actually just a case example of you just assess exactly what went wrong, and then you'd find like little root causes that could help you in the future. Like, I've always had a hard time determining if somebody was mentally ill versus is it just drugs? Because I bailed out one of your old clients that I don't think she's mentally ill. I think she was addicted on drugs, and that was why she was so irrational and acted so emotionally and erratically. And then as soon as she cleaned up, she was like a normal person when I bailed her out and got her into the house. She was all cleaned up. I have no, and this was that big one that I was talking to you about a few weeks ago. I have no doubts that she's going to be successful and she's going to go to court. I don't know if she's really mentally ill. She might have been textbook mentally ill, but as soon as she cleaned up, because she's in custody for so long, as soon as she got out, she's a doll. She's a doll.
Well, for the most part, the taking of the drugs is symptomatic of the problem. The mental illness is what pre-exists, and the part of the expression of the mental illness is getting addicted to a drug that they know is destroying them and continuing to use it. So once you can break the drug addiction, give them an alternative, usually they can get their mental health issues under control.
Yeah. No, she came out, and I of course am not a doctor. I don't know if there's medications involved, or maybe it was just sobriety. Whatever it was, it's above my pay grade. But she came out and she checks in with me every few weeks. She's really nice. She like how you probably arranged for her. She finished the programming so that she was eligible to get out. She got that culinary arts degree while she was in custody, which was amazing. And now she's like super stoked to be out and like pursue her dream. It's like, it worked. You know what I mean? Finally, something worked, No,
she's a success story. The critical part was getting her out there and supporting her, first with her drug rehabilitation, and then subsequent to that, getting a job. And it made a difference going to the Culinary Academy over at KCCC.
Yeah, which is a prestigious academy, and there's lots of jobs in the restaurant industry. My buddy's a chef, and although there is a high kind of fallout ratio, he was like, man, I get like maybe 2 out of 10 guys that are just straight studs, loves them. Like 7 or 8 of them just kind of no call, no show, and they're on their journey towards trying to get more consistent with showing up to work and learning and consistently showing up. But 2 out of 10, man, 20%, that ain't bad. That's 2 people's lives that are different.
I'm a big fan of the KCC Culinary Academy. My wife ended up on their national team some years ago before she got pregnant with our twins, and I still have the benefit of her being a wonderful chef.
Oh yeah. Well, next time you're having a little office party getting catered, you know my number, guy. You know my number.
Mr. Breiner, I'm going to get you out on this. Certainly, there's a lot of pros to this pandemic, the efficiencies that we hope can follow through to after. There's a lot of pros and efficiencies that we could all benefit from. But I'd like you to bring up some of the cons that we might not be thinking about. It's not all features. There's got to be a few bugs here and there. So with this new age of COVID-19 moving forward, what are some of your fears? What are some of the downsides to what the court is doing right now?
The right to confrontation. There's a benefit to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're hopefully more efficient in getting people out of jail, out of custody, resolving cases. We're having status conferences via video conferencing, so we're not taking up precious time in the court, and focusing on jury trials. The jury trials cannot be done via teleconferencing, via video conferencing. That is just, it's not going to happen. People may want that, and my concern is that that's going to become acceptable. And as anyone knows who does jury trials represents people, whether it's civil or criminal proceedings, having the opportunity to be in court and watch someone respond to the give and throw of questioning, the back and forth, and the question and answer, and looking at their expressions and their body language. That's what the core of our system's about. That's what our jury trial system's about. It's probably the most beautiful expression of our Constitution, is that right to a jury trial, the right to confront your accuser. And that means live in court, not via video camera. Now, occasionally we have that. Occasionally we do that with people that are not available for certain witnesses. But generally speaking, the more critical the case, the more dire the consequences, in other words, the greater the penalty, the more demands that we have a right to confrontation. And it's the diminution of that, the loss of that I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I hope moving forward, some of the changes are made permanent, but it's kind of like how the NBA or what is baseball? What are they? Major League Baseball, MLB. Okay, yeah, no, it's kind of like how the MLB or the NBA, they'll implement a change like in the minor league or the G League. They'll be like, hey, we want to speed up the game, so let's go ahead and have a pitch clock. And then they won't just change the World Series and implement it there. They'll go ahead and they'll do like a test for like just spring training, or they'll do it just for, AAA baseball. If they could implement, and instead of just having like a sweeping change and being like, hey, what's gonna happen? If they could just do in little phases, and the exact same thing with bail reform. If you just picked out like, hey, we want to go ahead and reform pretrial services and get more people out. If they just said, hey, you know what? How about we just do district court cases, traffic cases? If we could like build up some momentum when it comes to like using Zoom for video conferencing, or maybe seeing if there's some downsides. If you just start small and implement it in phases, I think that's just the smarter way to do it. And I hope the court just says, hey, we could have some of these changes and just experiment and go slow. And then gradually those changes, you know what I mean? They could catch some momentum, and then it could be the new norm, but then it could also be done in a safe way.
Yes.
All right, very good. So, hey, if people want to get in touch and they want to get more information on you, where could they go?
Go to my website, just type in Myles Breiner, attorney at law, and I'll get in touch with you. I have my cell phones also listed on my website, so it can be reached 24/7.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right, take care. Bye now.
All right.